The sky over Delta Vora 7 was blood orange, heavy with the smell of smoke and steel. The city's trade district, once bright with glowing neon, now echoed with fear. 1,000 languages rang through the air, but one thing was clear: life here was for sale. And death came cheap. Jareth Kale moved through the market with his last few credits hidden inside his worn jacket. He was a former soldier, human, forgotten after the Outer Colony Wars ended. Now he was just another drifter lost among alien worlds, looking for something he couldn't name. He had no home, no mission, no friends. Only guilt and the memory of screams from battles no one talked about anymore. Stall after stall sold strange meats, metal scraps, black market tech. But then he heard the sound. A soft cry. Not pain, not hunger. Fear. He followed the sound down a side alley of the marketplace, where the crowd thinned and the colors turned dark. That's when he saw them. 3 young alien girls, blue-skinned, with feline features, locked behind rusted iron bars. Their yellow eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. One of them gripped the cage with trembling hands. Another hid behind her sisters. All were dressed in torn cloth barely fit for warmth. They were being sold like cattle, fresh meat, the vendor barked. Rare species, soft flesh, tender, make your offer fast. They won't last long in this heat. Jareth froze. He had seen prisoners before. Slavery wasn't new. But something in the girl's eyes stopped him. They weren't animals. They weren't wild. They were scared and aware. And they were going to die unless someone did something. A man behind him laughed. I'll pay double if I can take all 3 raw. No preparation. I like the taste of fear. Jareth turned and stared at him. The man had tusks and oily scales. He smelled like spoiled blood and burnt metal. No one else around seemed to care. This was normal here. This was commerce. He felt his hand move before his brain caught up. His credits. All of them. He pulled them out and shoved them into the vendor's clawed hand. I'm taking them, Jareth said. The vendor blinked. You want to eat them here or to go? Neither. They're not meat, he growled. The vendor looked at the credits. It wasn't enough. Add 10 more and you get the cage key. Otherwise take them in pieces. Jareth clenched his jaw. He had no more. Just a rusty plasma knife in his boot and an empty water canister. But his hand didn't tremble. He pulled the knife slowly, held it low, eyes never leaving the vendor. Key, now. The vendor considered for a moment, then spat and tossed him the key. Freak, he muttered. Jareth opened the cage. The 3 girls flinched back at first, unsure. He held out his hand, palm open. You're free. I'm not going to hurt you. The tallest one stepped forward, slowly, cautiously. She didn't speak. None of them did. But she reached out and touched his fingers. Her skin was warm. She stepped into the light and nodded once. He motioned for the others. All 3 stepped into the alley, blinking at the sun like they hadn't seen it in days. The market went quiet for a moment. Eyes followed them. Some laughed, some scowled, some whispered. No one helped. They were outsiders now. Marked, prey. Jareth led them away, deeper into the slums of the city. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't know how to feed them or protect them. But he knew this. He was no longer walking alone. The city was alive with danger. Loud voices, flickering lights, broken walls, and hungry eyes followed them from every corner. Jareth knew this place too well. It was not built for mercy. He led the 3 alien girls through narrow streets where rusted pipes dripped black water. The stench of burnt metal filled the air. Every door seemed to hide something worse than the last. The girls followed closely behind. They didn't speak, but their wide yellow eyes never left him. Jareth stopped near a broken shelter deep in the abandoned trade district. It was once a supply post, long shut down and forgotten. He pushed the door open with a sharp creak. Inside, the floor was cracked, and only half a roof remained. But it was dry and hidden, and for now it was safe. The girls stepped in slowly. The smallest one looked around, then sat near the wall, arms around her knees. The tallest kept watching. Jareth, her face calm but alert. He knelt beside them and opened a small ration pack from his bag. It wasn't much, just 2 protein bars and a bottle of stale water. He split it into 4 pieces and gave each of them a share. They stared at the food but didn't move. "It's safe," Jareth said. "Eat, you need your strength." One by one, they accepted the food and began to eat in silence. Jareth leaned back and watched them. He didn't know their names or their language, but something about them felt more human than most creatures he had met on this cursed planet. He remembered war. He remembered orders. He remembered standing over bodies, wondering if it had all been worth it. And now he was here, feeding 3 alien girls with nothing left in his pockets but dirt and dust. He asked softly, "Can you understand?" "Any?" The tallest one looked at him, then slowly nodded. She touched her chest and said, "Saya." Her voice was light and musical. He pointed to her. "Saya," she nodded. Then she pointed to the smaller girl and said, "Nari." The last one, a quiet figure with sharp eyes, was called Zin. "I'm Jareth," he said. "You're safe now. I won't let anyone take you again." Saya looked at him for a moment, then whispered, "Thank you." It was the first time he'd heard one of them speak more than a name. It wasn't just relief in her voice. It was trust. That night, Jareth sat near the broken doorway with his plasma knife resting in his lap. He didn't sleep. He listened. The city outside breathed like a hungry beast. Somewhere far away, sirens screamed and then fell silent. Zin curled up in a corner, clutching Nari. Saya sat close to Jareth, watching the dark like a guardian. She didn't speak again, but her eyes said everything. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not while he was there. Morning came with harsh light cutting through the cracks in the roof. Jareth stood and stretched. His back ached and his thoughts were heavy. They couldn't stay here forever. Someone would come looking. Maybe the vendor. Maybe worse. He looked down at the 3 girls. They had risk written all over them, but walking away wasn't an option. He had chosen this path, and there was no turning back. They needed clothes, food, a new identity, and maybe, just maybe, a place where they could be more than just things behind a cage. He turned to Saya and said, "We move today. We need to disappear before someone tracks us." She nodded. Zin rose without a word. Nari took her hand and stood too. They were no longer prisoners. They were survivors. And Jareth was their only shield against a galaxy that had already forgotten them. The journey ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in a long while, Jareth felt something he hadn't known in years. He felt purpose. The street was colder than yesterday. The sun barely reached the ground between the metal towers, and the shadows felt longer than before. Jareth led the girls down tight backways where scanners didn't reach and voices stayed low. Saya walked close beside him, alert as always. Zin stayed in the back, watching for movement. Nari held Jareth's hand tightly, her small fingers trembling every time someone looked at them too long. Jareth had spent most of the night planning their next steps. The old shelter wasn't safe anymore. Someone might have seen them. Someone might have talked. And if even one word reached the market's butcher stalls, the wrong people would come. He needed a contact. Someone who still owed him favors. Not many were left from the war, but one name stayed in his mind, Vex Torman. Ex-smuggler. Ex-lieutenant. Blacklisted on every major system. If he was still alive, he'd be in the underground dockyards of Sector 11. They crossed through a narrow checkpoint by hiding under the belly of a rusted crawler truck. Oil dripped on them, thick and sticky, but they passed unseen. The city didn't look for people like them. It only noticed when they failed to pay or caused noise. Sector 11 smelled like fire and fuel. Bright signs buzzed overhead, advertising illegal weapons, biomods, and stolen data chips. Nobody cared who. You were here, as long as you didn't bleed on their boots. Jareth stopped outside an old garage sealed with a rusted iron door. The scanner pad was dead, but he remembered the old trick. 3 knocks, pause, 2 more. The metal clicked, then opened just a crack. A red eye stared out. No trades, the voice behind the door said. Closed forever. Tell Vex Torman. That ghost hands is here, Jareth replied. There was a pause. Then the door opened. A tall woman stepped out, dressed in armor made from scrap and shadows. Her left arm was mechanical. Her face was sharp as broken glass. You shouldn't be alive, she said. Jareth didn't smile. I need help. She looked past him at the girls. And you brought pets. They're not pets, he said. They're refugees, Vex narrowed her eyes. From where? From a cage. I bought them from a meat trader, she snorted. That's not a rescue, Jareth. That's suicide. You know how much those merchants pay to get their products? Back? They're not products, he said. There was a silence between them. Then Vex waved them in. You've got 5 minutes. After that, you're on your own. Inside, the room was dark and smelled of ozone and blood. Machines lined the walls, weapons, fake IDs, vials of stolen nanotech. This was a den of ghosts and outlaws. Saya looked around, alert and still. Zin studied the gadgets without touching. Nari pressed herself to Jareth's side, frightened by the heavy air. I need transport, Jareth said. And clean identities. For them, Vex raised an eyebrow. You planning to raise them like stray puppies? I'm planning to get them off this planet before someone eats them. She leaned on her desk, metal fingers tapping. You know the bounty on illegal flesh is high. Even higher if they're rare species. There's already word in the undernet about someone stealing 3 blue girls. Jareth felt his jaw tighten. Then I'm out of time, Vex sighed. You always drag storms with you. I'll help, but I want something back. What? She pointed to Saya. She's a communicator. Species. Fast learners. I need her to decrypt a stolen cum hub. No, he said. It's a harmless task. She's not for sale. Not for trade. Not for work. Vex stared at him, then laughed once. You've gone soft. I've gone human. He said. She handed him a chip. There's a safe house below the old turbine station. 3 days. I'll get the documents ready. After that, you're on your own. Jareth nodded and turned to leave. Saya gave Vex a long silent look before following. They didn't trust this place, and they were right not to. As they left the garage, a drone floated above them, quiet, watching. It didn't follow, but its lens glowed red for a moment before vanishing into the clouds. Someone had found them. Asterisk. The turbine station looked like the skeleton of a fallen beast. Twisted metal arms reached into the sky, broken by age and storms. Steam hissed from the ground, and the air smelled like rust and smoke. Jareth led the girls through a crumbled tunnel near the base of the old power core. The safe house Vex had mentioned was hidden beneath shattered pipes and forgotten systems. Few dared to come this deep into the ruins. A small door marked with faded numbers stood at the end of the tunnel. He pressed the chip Vex gave him against the lock. A green light blinked once, and the door opened with a sharp click. Inside was a narrow room with cracked walls and dim yellow lights. A broken couch sat in one corner. The floor was stained, and wires hung from the ceiling like dead vines. But it was dry, it was hidden. It would do. The girls entered slowly. Nari stayed close to the wall. Zin checked the corners. Saya walked in last, standing beside Jareth as if to silently approve the place. He dropped his bag and took a deep breath. We stay here until Vex finishes the IDs. No fires, no noise. We stay low. They nodded. No one argued. They understood. The danger. They had seen enough of this world to know how fast it could turn against them. That night, the wind howled through the vents above. Jareth gave the last ration bar to Nari and drank only half his water. Zin wrapped herself in a cloth. From the supply box. Saya watched the door with sharp eyes, her body still and focused. Jareth tried to rest, but his mind stayed awake. He remembered the man in the market, the one who had wanted to eat them. His kind didn't forget. They hunted for revenge, not for money. He stood up and walked quietly to the door. He pressed his ear against the metal. Nothing, but something in the air felt wrong. Like a shadow waiting to move, Saya joined him without a word. She pointed to her ear and nodded. She had heard it too. Jareth raised a finger, signaling silence. He pulled the knife from his boot and moved to the side of the door. Saya crouched, low, ready to warn the others. A faint click echoed through the tunnel. Then another, footsteps. Slow, heavy, controlled. Someone was coming. Not from the city above. From the tunnel itself. Jareth waited until the sound reached the door, then kicked it open hard. A figure stumbled back, caught off guard. The man was armored in black, his helmet glowing red with scanner lights. He raised a shock rifle, but Jareth was faster. He slammed into the intruder, driving his knife into the man's side. Sparks flew as the blade hit armor. The man fell back, firing wildly into the ceiling. Dust and broken lights rained down. Zin grabbed Nari and pulled her to safety. Saya rushed to Jareth's side and slammed the door shut. More footsteps echoed. Down the tunnel. They weren't alone. Jareth grabbed the intruder's rifle and handed it to Saya. Use the doorframe. Aim low. Only shoot if they try to enter. She took the weapon without hesitation. Her fingers wrapped around it with surprising ease. He didn't ask where she had learned. There was no time. He searched the fallen man and pulled a cum device from his belt. It blinked with an active signal. He crushed it under his boot. Number. More tracking. Tunnel escape? Zin asked. Jareth nodded. There should be one near the back wall. Go, I'll cover. Saya handed him the rifle and took the girls. Together, they vanished through the narrow crack behind the old control panel. Jareth waited until they were clear before he followed. The tunnel led deeper. Underground, cold, wet, cramped, but it was a way out. Behind them, voices shouted. The pursuers had found the room. But the family was gone. Hours passed before they surfaced again. The new location was a drainage sector near the old mines. It stank of oil and mud, but they were alive. Jareth sank to the ground, breathing hard. The rifle lay across his lap. Saya stood next to him, watching the horizon. Nari leaned against Zin, half asleep. They had survived another attack. But the world was closing in faster now. Each step forward would cost more than the last, and soon there would be a price he might not be able to pay. Rain fell like needles from the gray sky above. The old drainage sector turned into a maze of puddles and shadows. Jareth pulled his coat tighter and led the girls through a narrow gap between rusted support beams. Their clothes were soaked. Their feet dragged through the mud, but they kept moving. They had to. Every second they stayed in one place was another second closer to being caught. Jareth found a broken supply trailer tucked beneath the foundation of a collapsed transport bridge. Its walls were dented, and one side was scorched black, but the inside was dry enough to rest. He opened the door carefully, checking for traps. When none appeared, he waved the girls inside. They entered without a word, their faces tired but focused. Saya checked the back wall. Zin sealed the door. Nari curled into a corner with her knees pulled to her chest. Jareth lit a dim emergency lantern and placed it near the wall. It gave just enough light to see each other, but not enough to shine through the cracks. He looked at his stolen rifle. It was still charged but overheating. It wouldn't last another fight. His knife was chipped. His boots were torn. The girls were silent, but he could see the questions in their eyes. How long until Vex delivers the IDs? Zin asked. Jareth shook his head. 2 days, maybe less. If she doesn't betray us. You trust her? No, but she hates the flesh traders more than she hates me. That's enough. Saya sat near him and looked out through a small opening in the wall. She said nothing, but her hand rested near her side as if she expected trouble. Nari coughed once. The cold was getting to her. Jareth took off his jacket and draped it over her. She looked up with tired eyes and gave a soft nod. Time passed slowly. The storm outside grew louder. Jareth didn't sleep. He stared at the door and listened to every gust of wind. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and then stopped. In the middle of the night, a sound broke the silence. A soft knock. 1. Tap, then 2, then a pause. Then one more. Jareth stood up quickly. He raised the rifle and pointed it at the door. Who is it? He asked. A voice answered through the metal. Delivery. He opened the door an inch, keeping the rifle raised. Vex stood outside, wrapped in a black rain cloak. Her boots were muddy, and her face was tense. I brought the ID chips, she said. But you won't like the news that came with them. She stepped inside and tossed 3 small data cards onto the floor. Each one blinked with a green light. New names, new prints. Clean backgrounds, no history, you're ghosts now. Saya picked up the chips and handed one to Zin, and one to Nari. Jareth took the third and slipped it into his pocket. What's the bad news? He asked. Vex looked at him with a hard stare. The Flesh Cartel placed a bounty on your head. Not just for the girls, for you. How much? Enough to make even your friends consider selling you out. 100,000 credits. Dead or alive. Zin looked at Jareth. We should run. We already are, he said. No, Vex interrupted. You need to vanish completely. Not just change cities, change planets, change everything. I don't have a ship. You do now. I secured a ride for you, but there's a price. Jareth frowned. Of course there is. The pilot wants blood money. He'll fly you off this rock, but he wants a favor first. A hit. 1 man. Flesh dealer. High rank. Untouched by the law. Why? Me? Because you're already marked. You're already dead to this planet. 1 more kill won't change that. Jareth looked at the girls. They stared back in silence. He knew what they were thinking. He could see it in their eyes. They didn't want more blood. They didn't want more death. But they wanted to live. He stood slowly and picked up the knife. The chipped blade still held its edge. Where? Vex smiled slightly. Dock Sector 9. He'll be there tomorrow. Midnight. Alone. Jareth nodded once. Then tomorrow we leave this world forever. The air at Dock Sector 9 was thick with fuel smoke and tension. Shadows moved across crates stacked high like walls, and red lights blinked through the fog. Jareth stood still near a stack of old containers, waiting. His coat was wet from the earlier rain. His boots were heavy with mud. The chipped blade hung at his side, and the stolen rifle rested across his back. The time had come to pay the final price. Saya had begged him not to go alone. Zin had offered to come as backup. Nari cried quietly and held his hand for too long. But Jareth had made them stay behind with Vex in the trailer. If anything happened to him, they would still have a way out. A siren wailed in the distance. Then silence returned. He checked the time on his wrist chip. It was nearly midnight. A black hovercar pulled into the far corner of the dockyard. Sleek, expensive, untouched by the rust of the city. It hissed as it landed, and the doors opened with a smooth whisper. The man who stepped out was tall and dressed in fine leather armor. Gold chains hung from his neck and a long scar cut across his jaw. He didn't look around. He didn't need to. He thought he was safe. His name was Jurassic Ven. He was one of the top flesh brokers in the city. Ruthless, protected, untouchable. Until now, Jareth moved like a shadow through the rows of crates. Each step was slow, silent, controlled. The scarred man stopped near a shipping console, typing in codes. He was alone, just as promised. Jareth drew the knife. The metal gleamed under the red dock lights. He stepped forward, closing the gap. 10 meters. 5. 2. Duresk turned just as Jareth raised the blade. "You," he said with a smirk. "The human thief." The knife slashed down, but Duresk moved fast. Faster than expected. He dodged and pulled a shock pistol from his belt. The blast missed, striking a crate with a crackling flash. Jareth lunged again, forcing Duresk back. They struggled near the edge of the loading ramp. Blows landed hard. Metal met flesh. Blood splattered across the floor. Duresk was strong, but Jareth had purpose. With a final push, Jareth slammed him into the steel railing. The pistol fell. The knife pierced deep. Duresk gasped, eyes wide. Jareth leaned close and whispered, "This is for the cage." He pulled the blade free, and the man crumpled to the ground. Still, silent, finished. Jareth picked up the pistol and tossed it aside. He wiped the blade on his sleeve and stepped back. It was done. No cheering. No relief. Just quiet. The pilot Vex had spoken of appeared from the shadows. His eyes were cybernetic. His voice was rough. "Payment accepted. My ship leaves in 1 hour. Gate 17. "Understood," Jareth said. He returned to the safe house fast. The girls were waiting by the door. Nari ran to him and held on tight. Zin looked at his blood-stained sleeve but said nothing. Saya stared into his eyes and saw everything. "Is it over?" She asked. "No," he said. "But the way forward is open." They moved quickly. Vex handed them a small bag of supplies. Ration packs, water, blank cards. "Get to the gate before the scanners reset. You'll only get one chance." Jareth nodded. He didn't thank her. She didn't expect it. In their world, survival was the only reward. The journey to the port was tense. Patrol bots hovered above. Rooftops, street guards scanned crowds with cold precision. But they moved like ghosts, slipping between broken alleys and forgotten doors. Gate 17 loomed ahead. A small transport ship waited on the landing pad. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't new, but it had wings. And it could fly. The pilot waved them in. "We leave in 3 minutes. Strap in." Jareth helped Nari into a seat. Zin sat beside her, arms wrapped protectively. Saya stayed near the door until the hatch sealed. Then she turned to him. "You're hurt. I'll heal." Saya reached for his hand. Her fingers were warm against his bloodied skin. She didn't speak again. She didn't have to. The engines roared to life. The ship lifted from the dock, rising into the storm-filled sky. Below them, the city shrank. The cages, the cries, the pain, it all vanished into distance. They weren't safe yet, but they were finally free from the chains that had once held them. The stars stretched wide across the black sky as the ship pierced the upper clouds. Jareth stood near the window, watching the planet below vanish into smoke and light. Behind him, the engine hummed with quiet power. Zin sat in a rear seat, checking a small navigation screen the pilot had allowed her to use. Nari lay wrapped in a soft blanket, finally asleep. Saya stood beside Jareth, her eyes fixed on the stars just like his. They didn't speak. There were no words needed. The worst was behind them. The hunger, the fear, the blood, the cages, it was all part of a world that could no longer touch them. The pilot's voice crackled through the cum. "We'll reach the jump gate in 10 minutes. After that, you're out of system. No records. No pursuit. Fresh start." Jareth nodded. "Thank you." The man didn't reply. Pilots like him didn't work for thanks. They worked for clean exits and better silence. Saya finally spoke. "Where will we go?" Jareth turned to face her. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. I heard of a place near the rim colonies, open skies, clean water. No traders, no soldiers, just land and space." Zin looked up from the console. "Is it real?" "I don't know," he said. "But we'll find out together." She gave a small nod and turned back to the screen. Nari stirred in her sleep and mumbled something too soft to understand. Saya knelt beside her and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Jareth returned to his seat and closed his eyes. For the first time in months, his mind wasn't filled with violence. He thought of the stars, of quiet nights, of a home with no war outside the door. Minutes passed. The ship reached the outer zone. The jump gate shimmered ahead, a ring of silver light hanging in space. It pulsed softly like a heartbeat from the galaxy itself. "Hold on," the pilot said. "We're punching through." The ship shook gently as it aligned with the gate. Lights dimmed. The cabin buzzed. Then, in a single blink, the stars vanished and were replaced by new ones. Brighter, calmer, untouched. The rim system was older. Colder, but peaceful. No signals tracked them. No codes called their names. They were finally just people again. Jareth walked toward the front. "How far to the colony?" "About 2 hours' flight," the pilot said. "I'll get you close. But you'll need to take the landing pod." "My ship's not cleared for dirt." "That's fine. There's a river valley near Grid 14. Locals say it's empty and fertile. No fences, no scanners. Then that's where we'll start." Jareth returned to the cabin. Saya was now awake beside Nari, who sat up rubbing her eyes. Zin stood watching the stars. He smiled at them all and said, "We're almost there." They gathered near the pod bay. The small craft looked cramped, but it had landing gear and enough supplies for the start of a new life. Jareth helped them. Load in silence. No one rushed. Every movement felt full of meaning. Before he climbed into the pod, he turned back to the pilot. "For what it's worth, thank you," the man nodded once. "You did something no one else would. Keep going, don't stop." The pod detached with a soft hiss. It drifted toward the planet below. Clouds passed by the small window. A wide forest spread out beneath them, broken only by a winding river that glowed under the moonlight. They landed gently near a hill covered in tall grass. The air smelled clean. The wind was soft. Birds circled high above. Jareth stepped out first, boots sinking into real soil. The girls followed. Nari smiled and ran her fingers through the grass. Zin tilted her head to listen to the wind. Saya stood beside Jareth, her eyes shining in the sunlight. "This is good," she said. "It's a start," he replied. They built a small shelter with supplies from the pod. They worked together, slowly, carefully, like people learning to live again. Jareth showed them how to gather water. Zin mapped the land. Saya watched the stars each night as if guarding the sky itself. Weeks passed. The forest welcomed them. The river fed them. No one came, no one hunted. And nothing tried to cage them again. They had escaped the chains of the galaxy. Together, they had become more than survivors. They had become a family.